What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caparoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. It's that sweet spot between the start of free agency and the NFL draft. We have about 7 or 8 days until Connor is just going to disappear into draft guide hell.
Oh no,
And
it's
then
weekend.
he's already slowly creeping away, but CR, we got to take advantage of this time. We got a lot going on, a lot of questions to answer, which we're going to spread between the pod and the War Room recording. But how you doing? How you feeling?
Good. It is that time of year. Kind of wake up, knock out a couple of reports if you can before work or after work, whatever it may be, and we chip away at it. I always say this: we're really lucky right now that we have a growing team every single year. Greg, Meegs, and Dan are back with me again doing it, but
The gray beards at this point.
Really. But we've added PK into the mix. Max Toscano, who runs his own Substack. Remember the tight ends. It's all tight end focus. He's writing up a lot of the tight ends for us, which I know is a big talking point with the Jets. So the guide is rolling, and it's just that time of year where, I'm living in the world of like trying to get through as many 6th and 7th round and UDFAs as I can, which is a absolute caveman time of year for me.
For those who are newer here, really, when we launched Badlands beyond the core weekly podcast that is now twice a day on the feed, the draft guide was sort of the second key piece of what we launched. And that is just getting more and more comprehensive every year. It comes out about 7 to 10 days before the NFL draft for our War Room tier, and then gradually filters down to deep dive and is the best piece of draft collateral you can have if you're a Jets fan who is like me, like you don't follow the draft year round, but you want to get smart about who the Jets could be looking at. So one of the more exciting things we drop annually and we'll hit in April. So look out for that. Let's start with the tight ends. There's been a pretty big raging debate in our Discord over the past few days about the validity of considering drafting Tyler Warren at 7. And we predicted this would happen. We spent a lot of time last year talking about Brock Bowers and whether he was worth taking in the first round or not. It kind of ended up being the best of both worlds because Bowers was awesome, as we expected he would be. But it still looks like Olu Fashanu was the right pick because he looks like he's going to be awesome, and the Jets really need a left tackle because Tyron Smith was a disaster, and now they have that position taken care of. Warren, I think we both agree, not the prospect that Bowers is, but you got to look at every year independently. I would say, without question, one of the 10 best prospects in this class. The Jets still have a glaring need at the position. They also have a need at right tackle and a need at receiver. In some ways, Warren kind of helps with all three of those needs. I think, like many things, it's dependent on how the board breaks. I've been relatively pro taking Warren at 7. I think the thought of him working off of Garrett Wilson long term, the thought of how Justin Fields is likely to play and having a tight end like him, the thought of having the blocking support that they'll likely need at right tackle, and having really him sort of be the de facto number 2 receiver, all kind of makes sense to me. And I have little doubt he's going to be good quickly. Now, I see all the analytics debating that it's very rare that you draft a tight end that high and get the value back. And it's a deep tight end class, so you can make an argument that it's easier to find a tight end. You'll get one in round 2 or round 3, but every year's different. So I'm very open-minded about both sides of this argument. Personally, I would not be disappointed if the Jets took Warren. I also would not be disappointed if they took a right tackle or Mason Graham. And Mason Graham's been my consistent number 1 choice if he's there. What is your sort of step back take at this phase of Warren as a prospect and the consideration of the Jets taking him at 7 and the potential value around that?
First off, I don't think there's a wrong path between those 3 players. I think people like to get caught up sometimes in acting like, it's kind of this multiple choice situation. And sometimes there is that 4th choice that says all of the above. I would be surprised if Warren isn't a very good NFL player. I would be surprised if Mason Graham isn't a very good NFL player. And then you look at Armand Membu. I mean, with his athleticism and the tape he put out this year, he's on the trajectory of looking like a prospect that should be a very good NFL player. It all came together for him this year. He really checks every box that you're looking for at that position. He played right tackle, so for the Jets, he's kind of seamlessly playing his natural position. Although he was a guard recruit, I asked him about that at the combine. I'm like, you're a guard recruit that ends up playing college tackle and now might be the best tackle in this draft. I think he is the best tackle in this draft. Usually it goes the other way. Usually you're a tackle recruit and you end up thrown at guard. So it's kind of funny how that's worked out. I think that this debate, it's probably frustrating because it goes to show you the Jets' lack of addressing needs across the pro market so far. They haven't made a big trade. They weren't overly aggressive in the external market, which I've been kind of fine with that. I think that overall, I didn't see this as a year where the Jets need to kind of go out and spend all the money and try to right the ship right away and overspend and hand out bad contracts. But it really speaks to kind of the previous regime situation that they are so thin on the defensive line. But I guess the way I can explain it is I think you have a better chance of filling that defensive tackle hole on day 2 than the other 2 holes. And that's counting tight end. And the tight end class is solid, but there's not going to be, in my opinion, a Tyler Warren there on day 2. And there's probably not going to be an Armand Membu there on day 2 at right tackle. And I know it sounds insane to say with how much I love Mason Graham, but on day 2, you might find an above average starting defensive tackle that can hold the point of attack against the run and give you a little pass rush juice. That's how deep the draft is there. So all in all to say, I'm releasing my 3rd mock draft of this class for NBC Sports over the next week. I won't give away the pick, but I did sit there for a while going back and forth between Warren and Membu because you can explain it. Like when you look at it, there's benefits obviously to either side. Membu, plug and play right tackle, and it helps your run game and it keeps your quarterback upright. With Warren, it does the same thing where it's going to help your run game. They desperately need a number 2 pass catcher in this offense. It is scary hours right now looking around. So it kind of feels like what you wish is, and maybe they think this, right, with Chuck, like, a core four, maybe they think that he can at least hold the fort in camp while they're trying to see what they have in a day 2 pick at right tackle, where they could take the best player of the 2 in Warren. But Membu is really, really good in his own right, where you might not want to kind of play with your food in that situation. You might just want to be like, hey, don't get cute with offensive line. Take them early. There's a history now of showing the turnaround when a team gets the offensive line right. And I'm a believer that more often than not, you got to take the tackles in the first round. Guards, centers, you could find them littered all over the draft. You could develop them. I think that tackle is such a prototype position, the measurables and athleticism required. And then obviously the last variable is if they plan to move AVT to right tackle, which I'm a fan of, then take Warren, right? Like that's the simple part. But these are the things that we don't know. If you're holding fort that AVT needs to play right guard, then you probably have to take Membu. So these are things, Joe, that you and I can't answer. We can only lay out the scenarios. But the point is, I like both players quite a bit.
I mean, my thoughts are if Membu is going to be the consensus top tackle in the draft, I think he probably goes before 7. I could see the Patriots taking him.
Or
I
a
could see
trade
someone
up.
else. Yeah, or a trade up. Like, it's at that much of a premium where maybe he doesn't even last and it's not even a conversation. I worry about, and I like calling him Chuck because I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing his last name consistently. And that's a me problem, not a him problem. It's just my brain at this age. That reeks of like, we're going to try it with Wayne Hunter. We're going to try it with Anthony Clement. It just like feels like that where you talk yourself into it and he's just an unmitigated disaster. Yeah. He's an unmitigated disaster by week 3. And look, I think he's fine as a third tackle. I think making him your starting right tackle, that's kind of scary hours to me. And you hope that, fair. Can you find that 3rd round guy who can't be Max Mitchell or Carter Warren? But that's a conversation for a different day. I do think Jedrick Wills is still out there, but I think there's a reason he's still out there.
Yeah, he's really struggled to be good or healthy and healthy.
Yeah. Is that really a plug and play answer? And does something else, come available in that June window, the Dwayne Brown window, as we call it? Not that always worked out perfectly, but sometimes there's a veteran player that comes available around that time. The other name that is getting some more discussion kicked back up this week because he ran is Tet, a guy that we were talking about a lot that we stopped talking about. And it's like, did the draft community kind of sour on him? Is he not really a top 10 pick? He's a very specific kind of receiver the Jets have bluntly needed for a while.
Yeah.
I would guess like you're going to still see a handful of mocks that have him in consideration. I don't hate it. You'll never hear me complain about adding a massive receiver with a massive catch radius, especially with a somewhat inaccurate quarterback. But I have a hard time seeing that be the pick. I feel like it will be one of the other three, pending how it breaks. But where is Tet's stock sort of sit right now?
He's still my top receiver. I still have him number 10 on the big board. I haven't messed around with my big board too much lately. I've been more into just getting through more players. I don't know what to tell people when he's clocked between a 4.48 and a 4.56 that changed their opinion of him. If you watch him play, you knew he was a guy that was a low 4.5s-ish, mid 4.5s-ish kind of guy, and that's not why you liked him. You liked him because of his ball skills and ability to play above the rim. I keep comping him to Cortland Sutton, and Jets fans love Cortland Sutton and the idea of adding him every year. So I think the Tet conversation ended not because of the player. I think it ended because of a supply situation. And this goes back to the little bit of the combo we just had. The draft is a bit of a supply situation. And this kind of happened, I think, and positional value when I say that. The reality is this draft class, the wide receivers are largely viewed as a lot of number 2s and number 3s. And I think there's teams that graded Tet as a number 2 with the upside to be a number 1, but really a number 2. And that's okay. But the reality is for a team like the Jets who are looking for their number 2 wide receiver, the sample size of analytics in previous history in this era of drafting will tell you you have a good chance of finding a number 2 or fringe number 2 in round 2 or 3. And I know the Jets haven't been great at that, but still league wide. And this is a new regime. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least in the beginning. More so than finding a franchise tackle on day 2 or day 3, right? It's a numbers game. Now, the tight end combo is really complex because a lot of the best tight ends around football right now were day 2 or day 3 picks. But I think you just evaluate the talent. Warren, to me, is a difference maker. So that's why that combo is different. But the Tet one specifically is a supply conversation. It's hard for the Jets, as much as we like the player a lot, to take Tet McMillan at 7 and then truly tell you with the other picks they have, they could solve their pressing needs for the long-term future. Where if they take, the right tackle at 7 or the D tackle at 7, you kind of look around and go, I think they could actually find a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver on day 2 of the draft, because history tells us you probably can if you know what you're doing. So yeah, I think that's why the door closed specifically on that one, where I understand it, right? Like the draft is not, it's funny being a media draft person versus compared to teams. I think some people like to frame it as, it's if you were so good at it, you'd be working for a team. And then some other people like to frame it as actually being a one-man scouting department and ranking all these players is way more difficult than what teams have to do and all the resources they have. And that just goes to show you it's somewhere in the middle. They're different jobs. I'm ranking all the players. So I could sit here and tell you, hey, I think Tet McMillan is the 10th best player in the draft. But when you're drafting for a team, strategy is involved. How do I get the player that most significantly improves our team with the 7th overall pick that there's not a lot of supply of in the draft, versus the other way around on day 2 where I can go attack that supply where it's a little bit more bountiful, like plentiful. So that's kind of the difference with one of the many differences with the jobs, and something that the Jets are going to be keeping in mind as they attack the top 10.
So as we look at this collection of skill position players right now, the Jets had a visit with Rondale Moore today. Not someone your dad's going to like. Small football player, but fast, very fast.
Big Ten player, though. Yeah. Jim does like Big Ten players.
Some Big Ten